It is 12 noon. We'll get started in just a minute or two. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is John McNeil. I'm Dean of the School of Engineering. I'm here with Emily Perlow, the Associate Dean of Students. And we're here to tell you how we're gearing up for the fall. We've got maybe 30 minutes or so of slides, and then we'll open it up for questions. And we're really eager to tell you about what our team has been working on to welcome you back to campus. Next slide, please. So we really miss you. Here's a view of campus, and it's a beautiful place, but we really miss having you all here. Here's a comment from someone who did their first year online from abroad, and they finally got a chance to see campus and realize what a beautiful place it is. And it was great seeing people back on campus, but in de-densified form, it's just not the same. So we really look forward to welcoming you back. Next slide, please. Just reviewing the North Star that's guiding us on the team as we get ready. Keeping everyone safe and healthy is clearly our top priority, and serving you, our students, in these unprecedented circumstances. I think we did as good a job as we could have this past year, and we're looking forward to somewhat more precedented circumstances in the coming year. The faculty and staff have worked incredibly hard to provide our academic program and all the missions of our student life. And we want to keep our WPI family together. We've been stressed out, we know that, but through it all, we're trying to treat each other with great care and respect. And one thing I think we saw from testing, from how COVID affected our community, is we're certainly a community at WPI, but we're part of a broader community as well. In the city of Worcester, the state of Massachusetts, nationally, and even globally, we're part of a community on many different levels, and keeping all the different stakeholders in mind is something that's always top of mind to us. Next slide, please. We sent out a survey to all classes, undergraduate and graduate, over 1,700 responses. You spoke, and we listened. And here's what we heard on the next slide. First, with regard to what people want. People are ready to get back to normal, at least as close to normal as we can get. They're ready for the in-person experience that's a hallmark of WPI's environment. Tech suites and gathering spaces back open, in-person activities and classes, seeing a high rate of vaccination so we can all be safe, but also keeping the lessons learned in our new normal. For example, having class content available as part of the hybrid format was very helpful to many students. And while we won't be going back to the full hybrid experience, we will try to have more class content available for students who can't get to class for whatever reason. Next slide on concerns that people have. We haven't been to a lot of full-size events as we've seen, as we're used to at WPI. What's that going to be like? Everyday things like elevator capacities, things in dining, what will masking be like, what will testing be like, and we'll talk about all these concerns today as well. Next slide, Emily.
All right, so first things first, one of the things we definitely want to remind folks about is the upcoming deadline to submit your vaccination materials. As a reminder, that's on August 1st. Here's where we are today. So as of today, 90.3% of our employees are reporting a vaccination, and 73.6% of our students are reporting a vaccination. And so everybody needs to upload their vaccination materials or submit exemption materials by August 1. This is really critical, as any student who does not do that will not be able to come to campus and will not be able to take classes on campus. And so to help everybody get that material in as soon as possible, we're going to offer, thanks to the generous support of student government and graduate student government, a lot of prizes, things like gift cards, Woo Sox tickets, hammocks, longboards, a Nintendo Switch. And so the sooner you get your materials in, we'll start doing drawings late this week. So the sooner you get your materials in, the more chances you have to win up through August 1. So try to get those materials in as soon as possible. There has been a great question that we've seen from a number of students. When you go in and check your status, you see unverified. Don't stress about that. Our health services team is going through every single piece of vaccination material that you submit and looking at it. They will reach out if for some reason your materials didn't quite meet all the criteria. So you will get outreach through the health portal, which is called Medicat. Be paying attention to your email. You'll get some messages there. So if there's a problem, we will reach out to you. So don't stress if it says unverified at this time. Next slide. So here are some steps that you need to take in order to come to campus. The first thing you absolutely need to do, and hopefully you have already done so, is to go onto the We Are WPI website and take a look at the onboarding dates assigned to your specific student population. So for example, if you plan to arrive early for connections or international student orientation, you'll want to pay attention to those specific dates available to you there. Next, as I mentioned before, you need to upload your vaccine information or exemption forms no later than August 1. Yesterday, you received an email that pointed you to My Tech Flex, which is located on the hub, and there are some steps that you need to take there. So step 3, you need to sign testing consent forms. Even if you signed them last year, the forms are new because our testing protocols have changed. So it's incredibly important that you go in and sign those forms. You also need to select an onboarding date. So for those students who live on campus, your onboarding date and your specific date, your move-in times will come at a later date. We'll talk a bit more about that. But for all students, whether you live on or off campus, or you're an undergraduate or a graduate student, you need to select an onboarding date on My Tech Flex. If you live off campus or in a fraternity or sorority house, you also need to make an appointment on that day for an onboarding test, so choose a time. And that's really important so we don't end up with long lines and so that we can support the testing capacity. Now, if you live on campus, you're going to pick a move-in time, which will also be your onboard test time at a later date. So look for details on that soon. And additionally, if you are an international student or you're living abroad, please remember to follow the additional guidance you've received from International Student Life. Next slide. A couple of important dates to mark. We have a number of different orientation programs this year. We have our typical new student orientation. So if you're a first-year student or a transfer student, a new transfer student, August 21st through the 24th are important dates for you to mark down. Graduate students, if you're a new graduate student, August 20th through the 24th, there'll be a number of different orientation activities. And then TA orientation will be August 23rd through 24th. Additionally, this year, and new this year, is our SOFX program. SOFX stands for Sophomore Experience. And this is going to be a year-long program for class of 2024s. It's going to focus on helping folks build connections, get connected to faculty and staff, get more involved and engaged on campus. The deadline to sign up for that is August 1. So you'll want to check your email and make sure to sign up. We'll be offering a specific sophomore-focused orientation August 22nd through the 24th. Next slide. Also, mark your calendar for Family Weekend. October 1st through 3rd. For many of our students, it's a great time to catch up with family, get them to take you out to a nice meal, and just a chance to see your family and have some fun with them on campus. Next slide. Right, now we're going to transition a bit to talking about some health protocols. The first one is face coverings. That was something students wanted to know more about. Face coverings are going to be optional for those who are fully vaccinated. However, if you are not fully vaccinated, including those who've applied for an exemption, if you fall within that category, indoors you must wear a face covering. They're also going to be required for everyone, regardless of vaccination status, on things like SNAP or the campus shuttle, as well as some additional locations like health services. Anyone can wear a face covering. I personally prefer to wear a face covering when I'm in spaces with lots of folks, even though I've made the choice to be fully vaccinated. So just because you see someone with a face covering on doesn't necessarily communicate their vaccination status. We want folks to feel safe on campus and to make the choice that it makes the most sense for them. Additionally, I think we're going to find that for many of us, maintaining space, we've practiced social distancing over the course of the last year and a half or so, and some folks are going to continue to want to maintain that space. And so we want to make sure that we're respecting those boundaries for folks as well. Next slide. All right, so let's talk a little bit about testing. So we'll have a new location this year. It will still be in Harrington Auditorium. And for those who are new to our campus, the photo you see here is the main floor of Harrington Auditorium. It will be moved to the top floor of Harrington Auditorium. There'll be a pooled PCR test. And basically it's the same test that you've been taking, except we're going to use multiple samples that will be tested at once. So a pool of samples will be tested. If one of those pools tests, or if in that pool, one of those tests is positive, then we're going to reach out to everyone in that pool and ask them to come and take a rapid test. And so that test will be done on site. It's done in about 15 minutes with the goal of being able to zone in on if there was a positive person in that pool, that we can work to get that person isolated and appropriate context quarantined as quickly as possible. So we'll do the pooled PCR test initially, and then that rapid test to follow if we have a positive test in the pool. One of the benefits of this, we heard some great feedback from students about the amount of paper waste and plastic waste that was associated with this test. This is going to greatly reduce some of that waste. It's also going to allow us to respond really quickly for in cases where we have a positive test. Anyone who's having symptoms, for those who've been on campus, you are familiar with our symptom tracker. The symptom tracker is going to stay in place, and we're going to ask folks to use that symptom tracker to let us know if they've had contact with a positive person or if they are experiencing any COVID-like symptoms. And they will be able to come to health services and get a rapid BinaxNOW test right on the spot. So you're not necessarily going to have to wait a whole day to know what your status might be. COVID positive individuals, as I mentioned, will isolate, and close contacts will quarantine. So let's talk a little more about what that looks like as soon as I talk about routine testing. So after you've completed your onboard test, so that's the test you're going to take the day you get to campus, and there are set days for those onboard tests. So you want to, once again, make sure on your TechFlex that you're scheduling those onboard tests, and then you're scheduling a time for that test. Once you've completed that first test, that's your onboard test, then you start routine testing. Well, good news for folks who are used to testing twice a week at the end of the academic year, you now only have to test once a week. And that's the case for everyone, regardless of your vaccination status. And the reason for that is we really want to make sure that there is a possibility of a breakthrough infection for someone, even if they're vaccinated. While the chance is low, it is possible. And we want to make sure we're keeping our whole community safe. And so every single person, faculty, staff, student, will test once a week. You can do that every 7 days, and you can decide when that is. There is no assigned testing days any longer. No appointments are required. However, I want to strongly suggest that you think about appointments. And the reason being is you can set it up to get a text message reminder. It can go on your Outlook calendar for those who live and die by that calendar. I can provide a great way for you to be reminded, so you don't I know for me, I will forget that it's been 9 days and then I won't end up staying in compliance. So for me, I will set those appointments. That way I stay on track. So the thing that's important to know is that folks who don't adhere to the expectations about testing weekly will engage with our student conduct process, and we don't want that. So think about ways that you need to put strategies in place in order to make sure that you remember once every 7 days at your convenience, you get tested. Next slide. All right, so here's where we'll talk a little bit about close contacts and if there's a positive COVID test. So just a reminder for folks who are new to our campus, for both quarantine and isolation, if students live on campus or in a fraternity or sorority house, they're eligible to quarantine or isolate in our campus space. We'll provide support for meals. We will provide support for academic access, and that's true for students who live on campus in a fraternity sorority house. And then those who live off campus, we're here to help provide access if students are facing barriers to access food. For any student who needs help making arrangements with their faculty member, we will work to support them. As I mentioned before, every student will use a symptom tracker to report any COVID-like symptoms and any close contact with a COVID positive person. So if you look down in the bottom right of the slide, close contact with a COVID positive person applies for, you can be identified as a close contact if you are unvaccinated. So for our vaccinated students, you would not be considered a close contact. But if you are unvaccinated, you would be required to quarantine for 7 to 14 days, depending on your symptoms. And you would be tested multiple times so that we would be able to know if you're positive throughout that quarantine time. If you test COVID positive, students will isolate for at least 10 days. And as we have done in the past year, we have a team of folks that will help provide support for students, whether that's health-related questions, access to meals, academic access, et cetera. So we're here to support students if you experience this during your time this year. Next slide. So here's a little snapshot of what the My Tech Flex looks like on the hub. Hopefully many of you who are on this call have already gone on, or you did it as I mentioned it before. And you'll see here, you'll assign tasks. So you'll want to assign those consent forms. You want to choose your onboarding days. And then if you live off campus or in a fraternity sorority house, you want to make your testing appointments. Later in July, if you're a residential student, you will choose a move-in time, and that will also be your onboard test time as well. Next slide.
All right, thanks, Emily. Let's take a look at what life will be like on campus and in the classroom. With in-person activities resuming, most campus offices, in addition to the in-person office hours, will continue to have some virtual meeting options. Rigorous cleaning protocols will remain in place on campus. You'll see the sanitizing supplies, hand sanitizer, cleaning supplies will still be available. We'll have more water bottle filling stations, and you'll see when you return that the Adirondack chairs are here to stay. Next slide, please. In the classroom, I think if you click one more, we'll get back to the picture. Sure. We'll be reverting back to full capacity in all academic spaces, not just lecture halls, but also tech suites, study spaces, project spaces. We will keep sanitizing supplies and the enhanced ventilation that we put in place during COVID. Course delivery formats will return to the pre-pandemic methods, in person and online. We don't envision a return to full hybrid, but we will incorporate lessons learned from hybrid delivery. We're encouraging faculty to use lecture capture options. Some faculty may do more than this, some may do less, depending on the format of the class. Check the syllabus or the Canvas page for the classes you're in to see what faculty will be doing. For students with approved accommodations through the Office of Accessibility Services, continue to use the usual request process there. Next slide, please. So every year we rebuild course schedules as enrollments change. And this year, in addition to going back to the full capacity classroom scheduling, we're rebuilding 2 years worth of schedule changes. So there are two kinds of rebuilding going on. First of all, for first year students who are coming to WPI's campus for their first year, whether it's undergrad or graduate, the Office of Academic Advising and Student Support staff are reviewing every student's schedule, trying to resolve waitlist issues for undergraduates, getting to the goal of 3 courses in A term and 3 in B term. Because of COVID, AP credit is coming in late this year, so that we need a little more time to make sure students have signed up for a schedule that makes sense for them. We're also verifying transfer credit. If our advising staff sees a problem, they'll reach out to you by August 1st. So please watch your WPI email if you need any correspondence on resolving those first-year student issues. Additionally, in academic departments, departments will be adding sections to meet demand. They'll be looking at wait lists. Again, we're going through a couple years of schedule changes as course populations and student enrollments change. So it's not unusual to go through this process as departments add new conference and lab sections. There may be some evening lab sections for high demand courses. We do have limited online offerings at the undergraduate level for international students who can't get back to campus. There's a separate process for that. And again, schedule updates will be done by August 1st. And there may continue to be more updates after that, but the first wave of updates we anticipating being completed by August 1st. So again, that's a date to look for to see that those wait lists are resolved. Next slide, please. For global projects, a huge part of the WPI experience and the challenges for us to balance the goals of everyone completing their IQP requirement while keeping everyone safe and healthy. The Global Experience Office evaluates risk with a multi-step decision process, and there are many factors that need to be considered, and they're specific to each site. So as A, B, C, D terms go on, you'll see some sites are open, some partially open, some places where it's just not safe to travel. We're looking at factors like national entry restrictions, what's the rate of COVID-19 infection in the area around the project site, for the local project partner, what's their status of operations? And also, if something goes wrong, what's the quality of available local medical care? And as I said, these are very specific to individual sites, so watch for information from the Global Experience Office if you are planning project travel this year. Next slide, please. Sports and recreation, back to normal. Varsity and club sports fully operational as they were pre-COVID. Intramurals are back, PE classes are back in person with some online options too. And athletic spaces and fields are fully available after your onboarding test. Again, rebuilding the bubble, making sure we're all safe and healthy. After your onboarding test, those athletic spaces and fields will be available. Emily, next slide.
All right. Let's talk a little bit more about student life. So living on campus for those who are returning students, will return back to the typical on-campus living experience that you're used to. Students will be able to keep their doors open. They may have visitors who are WPI students come to their buildings and visit them. Our lounges and tech suites will be open, and you'll see lots more programming from the RAs and Insight teams. Additionally, laundry facilities will be accessible for all residential students. Next slide. When it comes to clubs and organizations, get excited for an in-person student activities fair. There'll be over 200 clubs and organizations with tables all across the campus on a specific day, more details to follow, in which folks will be able to meet and greet with all the different clubs and organizations. Additionally, in the city of Worcester, lots of things are happening around the city. We're pretty excited about the Woo Sox Stadium opening. For those who are local this summer, definitely go check out a game. There's more than 100+ things to do in the city of Worcester, and those are also rebounding and bouncing back and being more available and open. You can expect that meetings and clubs will happen with 100% capacity. Community service programs will be ongoing. Clubs will be able to travel off campus, and visitors and vendors will be welcome. We'll be offering a meeting for all club and organization leaders at a later date. So if you are an officer in a club, keep your eyes open for that information coming to your mailbox soon. And then let's talk a little bit about dining. If you want to flip to the next slide, we are right in the midst of renovating the Goat's Head. And here you see an image, a rendering of what the C-Store will become. It's going to become an innovation kitchen. The students voted in the spring, and so our first restaurant that will be in that space, changing every 7 weeks, will be Melt Lab. So it's a grilled cheese lab. It is delicious, and so I'm very excited about this opening, as well as a Starbucks opening in the Goat's Head. So for those of you who are Starbucks junkies, you can get excited for that. Dunkin' Donuts still remains in the campus center. So for those who run on Dunkin', you can still get your fix as well. But all locations will be open across the campus. We will not be requiring dining reservations. Mobile ordering will stay in place. And we're also going to be ramping up a Grubhub style delivery mechanism for students. We are keeping our cashless transactions. We found that to work really well. So you want to charge up those Goat Bucks and make sure that you have cash on your Goat Bucks, or use your debit card or a meal plan. All right, next slide, and over to John.
Thanks, Emily. So to summarize with some friendly reminders, go to We Are WPI and verify your assigned return to campus days. Make sure you upload that vaccine information or the exemption forms by August 1st. Sign the testing consent forms on MyTechFlex on the hub. Also, make sure you sign up for your onboard test so you can come back to campus and we can rebuild that bubble safely. Select the onboard date on MyTechFlex. And mark your calendars for orientation dates for your specific student population. So with that, we will send it off to the Q&A and answer any questions that people might have. And let's see. I see one question from Katarina about classes with graduate classes or hybrid, with lectures being online and labs in person, both online during the pandemic. Will graduate labs return to being in person for the fall? As a general rule, yes, any in-person experience such as a lab will be in person in the fall. Some faculty may choose to do things differently. I actually taught a class in C-term and had a remote lab experience with videos, and I'm going to keep those videos archived for future times I teach the class. Students found they were helpful even for doing the in-person labs. But we anticipate returning to fully in-person operations. For graduate classes that have an online component, you probably would want to check the Canvas site or with the instructor for that class. But we're anticipating returning to fully in-person operations as much as possible.
And I know Christine was helping go through the many questions that are being asked. We've got lots of folks on the back end who are also trying to answer those live as well. Christine, what are some common themes we're seeing?
Absolutely. If it's okay, we do have some questions about vaccination and just health services in general. So this might be for either one of you or even for a health team experts on the panel. There are some questions about if students are unvaccinated and haven't submitted an exemption form, are they going to be allowed back to campus? And I know we did talk about this during the slide, but maybe we could talk a little bit about that, but also, you know, how many students, knowing that we've also shared the vaccination rates, how many students have applied for exemptions?
I can take a stab at that, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jen to help fill in any gaps if she would be so kind. So unvaccinated students can come to our campus if they apply for and receive an exemption. And those are based on a religious observance and or a health-related rationale for not being vaccinated. It's a very small percentage of our students at this time. We are expecting the vast majority of our students will upload their vaccination information. Jen, help me fill in where I've left information out.
Yeah, Emily, you have that right on. So any student who needs a medical or religious exemption for the vaccine, you should fill out the form, and you can find those forms on the Health Services website. And you just have to fill out that form and include any documentation that's needed for your exemption. And the form explains all of that for you. But you will need that form on file in order to return to campus. As for our vaccination rates, Emily shared early in the presentation, our the information we have at this point is 73.5% of our students are fully vaccinated, and they've shared that information with us. And we're seeing our exemption rate is at about 1% of the information we have at this time.
And thanks so much, Jen. That's very helpful.
Jen, you might not want to go anywhere. We've got another question that's probably coming your way. Can you talk a little bit about how guidance has changed, specifically how close contacts are being identified? And does it matter indoors versus outdoors, and if people are vaccinated or if they're not?
Yeah, absolutely. So we follow the Mass Department of Public Health and the CDC guidelines around close contacts. And so there are a couple of things. One is any close contact that occurs outdoors, vaccinated or not vaccinated, is not considered a close contact any longer. So you'll remember, for those of you who have been at WPI for a while, it didn't matter where you had close contact with someone, you were considered a close contact. Well, the CDC and the Department of Public Health in Massachusetts have both said if you have close contact outside, that is not considered a close contact with a COVID positive person. So that has been dropped. And if you look at our definition now, a close contact is close contact with someone for 15 minutes or more indoors. For vaccinated individuals, as long as you have no symptoms, you wouldn't be considered a close contact. You wouldn't have to quarantine. For unvaccinated individuals, you would have to quarantine, as Emily talked about earlier, for that 7 to 14 days, depending on your symptoms, if you're having any symptoms or anything. And then any unvaccinated person that is quarantining will get tested multiple times throughout your quarantines.
Thanks, Jen. I won't pepper you with any more questions for now. Maybe switching the gears to academics. I know we had a question about if there are any considerations being made to change the length of the AB break or just breaks moving forward. They're a little bit shorter than they had been in previous years.
Right. So as far as I know, we're going to stay with the AB break that we have right now. And I don't believe we're looking at any change for C and D either, but longer term, we'd like to get back to normal. There are various reasons for the breaks, and very often they're driven by having to get grades in on time at the end of the semester. Longer breaks are nicer because we know the 7-week term can be intense, and we have multiple concerns that we're trying to balance. I see in the chat the CD break is back to normal, so that's good news.
Great, thank you. Thinking about our graduate students, we did have a question about graduate classes, and that there were some classes that were hybrid last year with lectures online, lectures online and labs being in person. As we move to the fall, are we looking for purely in-person opportunities for graduate students?
As much as possible. Again, it's up to individual instructors if they want to have some kind of experience available for the off-campus students. And I suspect for online graduate classes, even before COVID, they've had to address that. So in some sense, going back to normal is how those instructors for those online grad classes that have in-person labs, how they've addressed that in the past.
Now, John, those students who are in a fully online course, though, potentially will maintain, if that's how the program is designed, it would stay online, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Great, thank you. We did have some questions regarding residential services, and so maybe Casey might want to pop on. We'll have a couple questions for her. One of them being is how residential services is changing their approach to doubles, triples. How are our residence halls going to look for students in terms of living this year?
Sure. So for the most part, our housing is going to remain de-densified as we had it last year. So we will have triples in spaces that traditionally have been triples in rooms like Institute and Riley. Those are the much larger spaces. We will also have triples in Daniels and Founders, but Stoddard and Morgan, Messenger, the Hampton Inn, and a number of other spaces will remain doubles for this coming academic year.
Great, thank you. And could you speak a little bit to the waitlist process for housing, and also just kind of confirming when students are coming to campus and they're onboarding, They're not going to have to isolate for that particular time. They're just going to have their onboard test and can participate in activities on that day.
Sure. So for the first question you asked me, which has now escaped me, what was the first thing you asked me?
I'm sorry, I doubled up there.
It's like an interview and I forgot.
Can you talk a little bit about the waitlist process?
Sure. So we're still working on the wait list actually pretty actively. We're still working on a number of housing solutions. We know there are a number of students, like a large number of students that are still looking for housing. So we are doing everything we can to get as much housing as possible to house those students without making more triples, since I just talked about that. So we anticipate being able to communicate with students about some housing assignment options at the end of next week, the beginning of the following week. We know that you're anxious for this information and we're anxious to be able to work with you on it. But as you can imagine, it's taking us some time to find some solutions. So we're still working on it. One of the things I want to mention around the waitlist is we've actually closed the waitlist form because it is becoming very challenging for us to be able to meet all of the needs of all of the students who want housing. And we don't want to create a situation where you've filled out that form and so you think you're going to be able to get on-campus housing. At this point, we're not able to accommodate anyone else on the wait list, and so we've actually closed the form. And now, what was your second question?
It was just talking about onboarding and just confirming that students, when they come on to campus, they'll be tested and then they'll be able to continue to participate in activities throughout that day.
Sure. So yes, in general. And if Jen wants to chime in, if I misrepresent this at all, please do. But I think generally speaking, if you are a vaccinated individual traveling within the domestic United States, then yes, that is the case. But if you're traveling internationally and or have a vaccine exemption for some reason, and or we're not able to get vaccine, there's a number of things that play into that. But generally speaking, if you're traveling from within the US and you are vaccinated, yes. If you're traveling internationally, it's a little more complicated. And I know there's been a number of communications specifically to those international students around what that quarantine might look like upon arrival and getting vaccinated and things like that.
And just to confirm, if we have international students who might be having issues with access to vaccine or have any questions, they should be reaching out to either the health team or the National Office for Student Life, correct?
Yeah, and I believe they can reach out directly to the vaccine working group and they can assist them directly.
Great, thanks, Casey.
Sure.
Thinking a little bit about student life, I know, Emily, you mentioned that we have Family Weekend coming up in October. Could you give some clarity to how families and loved ones can engage with students on campus? Will there be restrictions, during some of our larger programming like Family Weekend, but also just if parents wanted to swing by?
Great question, Christine. At this time, we are allowing visitors to come to our campus. So if a family member could certainly come and take their student to lunch. Family members will be able to assist with move-in. Casey, correct me if we've had any changes to that plan, but we will allow family members to assist with move-in. And so family members are absolutely welcome. Visitors to the residence halls outside of that move-in time at this time are limited to the WPI community members. So we wouldn't have folks coming in, hanging out in their student's room, but they could certainly meet the student right outside the building, could walk around the campus, could grab lunch in the campus center. Those are certainly available. And so Family Weekend is being slightly modified, that schedule. We're thinking about it carefully because we've heard from folks, do we want to have 2,000 people on our campus all at the same time? And so how do we design a program that allows for smaller interactions, but allows everybody to get access to the content? So we're thinking about that deeply right now under the leadership of Christine Sherry, and more details will be forthcoming soon.
Great, thanks, Emily. Switching over to global projects, we have had some questions in the chat about just project centers in general, when decisions are being made, how they're being made. And so I wonder if Erin, who is on the panel, might be able to provide some additional information.
Sure. Thanks, Christine. So we have gotten through almost all of A and B travel decisions. There are some B-term locations that are still awaiting a final decision. And the only reason for that is that we need to work with the center directors and then also work with the CERT team and members of the CERT team to finalize an approval. So in the coming weeks, we should have decisions on all project center travel. And those, in In contrast to last year, where we were making term-by-term decisions, everything now is very individualized, like Professor McNeil said, on a larger scale of how we're evaluating each site. So if you are on an IQP or MQP in A or B term, a global projects program, IQP or MQP, you'll be hearing directly about your program, not just about A and B term travel.
Great, thanks, Erin. We did have a question beyond family weekend, some of those large scale programs like career fairs. I don't know, Emily, if anybody else on the panel could speak to those types of programs.
We will be having those programs. We mentioned the student activities fair. The career fair is happening September 16th, I believe. So you can mark your calendar now. We're actually exploring and not fully finalized, but sort of a 1 day in person and 1 day kind of more hybrid. We have some employers that their companies are still not widely doing travel. And so we want to create ways for our students to connect with those companies also. So, we've talked, Dean McNeil talked a bit about the idea that we have some learning that has come from the pandemic. And I think the idea of having both, the ability to attend some programs remotely is an example of some of that learning. And so the career fair adjustment is part of that. We are looking at things like what homecoming and how does homecoming look, as this is a constantly evolving kind of set of decisions that we're making, but our expectation is that we'll have large scale programs available to students in the fall. Work on Worcester, I know, is that first weekend, full weekend back. So look for that as well. It's a great community service opportunity.
Thanks. We also had a question about student health insurance, wondering if it can be waived for graduate and or for undergraduate students.
There is a waiver process for health insurance. The waiver itself is located linked from the Bursar's website. Students can investigate there. If you have additional questions, you can email the Bursar. And I see Greg's coming on. He's got some intel that he wants to share. So our Dean of Students, Greg Snoddy.
And essentially, I'll just share that very soon, either this week or early next week, we'll be sending out a note to all students with regards to process for waiving health insurance, if you will. But all students, as you remember, have to have that health insurance. So the rates are in there and everything. So it's a pretty easy process.
Thanks, Greg. Switching over to academics, if we can, we did have some questions about what music is going to look like in the fall. I think we're all excited to hear, just the talent of our students, but maybe John or Art could provide a little bit more detail about what musical academic space is going to look like on campus.
I believe we're going to be back to normal. Art, do you have any confirmation of that? Right.
Yes, we are back to normal. Best news of the day.
Yeah.
Can't wait to go see productions in person and looking forward to seeing our very talented students perform.
I was actually looking forward to if they would continue to serenade us every night when we walk to the parking garage. I thought that was actually really
I love that. I love listening to the pep band practice from my office in the evenings. So
drama and music is back to normal.
Yep.
Great, thank you. And we did have a dining question. Emily, do you know if the Starbucks in the Goat's Head will be providing any type of subsidized opportunities for students, or what will that experience look like for our community members?
Great question, Christine. So in general, if you look across our campus, we benchmark retail prices for all of our dining locations annually. And so, we look to see, what are folks in the area charging. So I think you can expect competitive market prices for those lattes and pastries on the campus. As always, you'll be able to use Goat Bucks in those locations as well. So that does get you a 10% discount. So I always encourage the Goat Bucks because will reduce your price a bit.
Absolutely. And there's some great new concepts coming out of the Goat's Head in Founders Hall. I wonder if we might be able to share a little bit about those and also what dining might look like for students.
Absolutely. So in the Goat's Head, there'll be a Starbucks. Goat's Head will now be open for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You'll have Starbucks. We'll have 2 rotating concepts. So we'll be starting with a faux concept as well as a paper lantern concept, which is a Chinese food concept. Those were selected by our students as some of their favorite choices. The nice thing about what we've done here with the melt concept as well across the hallway in the lobby of Founders is we've designed those spaces to be really easy to rotate over. And so you'll be looking, it's cool because you'll be able to have something for A term and that will transition and change in B term. And we're going to ask students what they want. So you'll be able to vote, and whatever is the top vote getting restaurant concept will be the next thing that you'll be able to check out. So we know study spaces can be a premium on our campus. This will be a great space for you to go grab your Starbucks or get your paper lantern, grab your melt sandwich, and be able to sit down and gather with friends. You'll be able to do some mobile ordering on the mobile app, pre-order and just grab it and sit down and start studying or working on homework. So we think it'll be a really fresh, new opportunity for students.
Great. Thank you. And also thinking about academics, knowing that, if we do have some students that have to quarantine or have to isolate, what's the support structure there to ensure that those students are still being able to be successful in their academics?
Right. So we're encouraging faculty in courses where it's appropriate to use lecture capture. So students will be able to keep up with what's going on in class. We're also encouraging faculty, if they have students who can't get to campus, to use synchronous connection methods like Zoom office hours or Zoom help sessions if necessary. But as always, if we look at the theme of going back to normal, whenever I teach, I always do my best to accommodate students who have to travel for job interviews or sports teams, or who have to miss a day of class being sick. And one of the lessons we learned in COVID was by adding the lecture capture hardware and software to all the classrooms, we think we'll be able to provide that kind of support in more courses. And as I've talked with faculty, there are some faculty who say, I have a discussion class where it's really important for people to be there in person, or the topics we're discussing in class, students don't feel comfortable being recorded. So it won't be available in every class, but we're making it more seamless for faculty to do recording of what's going on in class for students who can't be there for whatever reason.
Great, thank you. One area that we haven't had the opportunity to talk a little bit about is athletics, and just what physical health is going to look like for our students. And so we did have some questions about for teams that are practicing or who are competing, what kind of experience should they expect, but also are family members and just super fans in general able to come and cheer them on?
So I can answer the question that yes, I'd love to have Donna Harmon join us, who represents our physical education and recreation and athletics program. But regarding spectators, yes, spectators are welcome and able to join us on campus. And so we definitely all want to cheer on our teams who I know are really anxious to play.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. So we're planning on being fully back and involved with practices daily and contests daily in club and varsity sports. The rec center is going to be fully opened, no more reservations. The only areas that we still have to figure out is kind of in those competitive situations with athletics, what are going to be the requirements to be cleared to compete? And we're working on that with our health services and working on that with our opponents to see what testing they may have, et cetera. So we're still all trying to figure that out right now. We do know that when people come indoors, whether it's fans, whether it's those using the rec center, they will be, those that are unvaccinated will need to adhere to the university policy of wearing a mask.
And Donna, I'm seeing a question just popping up in the question panel about live streaming. Can you talk a little bit about how and if games are ever made available via live stream?
Yes, we have been fortunate to be supported by University IT in streaming, I believe, 100% of our contests. We can't guarantee that when the teams compete away from us, but all of our home contests are live streamed. And for the most part, I would say about 95% of our away contests are also live streamed, except for the sports of track and field. It seems that a lot of people are not able to do that type of live streaming. But every other sport, we do tend to have our parents, family, and friends being able to watch those games wherever they are.
Great, thanks, Donna. We did have another question about student services, specifically, thinking about offices that have been remote or have been in person. Our offices like our Student Development and Counseling Center, are they going to be able to, will students be able to meet with counselors in person or online?
Great question, Christine, and I'm glad someone asked it. So we're expecting that all of our offices will be open. Sabrina is hopping on, can give some details about SDCC to kick things off.
Yeah, absolutely. The SDCC, we are moving, currently, we are moving to meeting in person with students. We are still going to be offering the teletherapy option for those students who do feel more comfortable in that capacity. But when you call, if you call or email us to schedule that appointment, let us know if you'd like to meet in person and we will make it work.
Thanks, Sabrina. And I would say I think that's true for most of our offices. If we have a student who, maybe they have back-to-back classes and they just have this quick question and they say, can I hop on Zoom real quick and chat with you? I think most of our offices would be more than willing to accommodate students through remote options. I think in general, a lot of our student services folks, we want to meet with you in person. We want to see you. We're excited to have students here. And so I think just let us know what your preferences are, but we're going to be here and our offices will be open.
Great, thank you. We do have some questions about seeing information in Workday, specifically information about scholarships. Is there a good contact or person to reach out to with questions about student accounts?
I think there's two places to go depending on the nature of a student's question. If you have questions about your scholarships, then I would encourage you to be working with student aid and financial literacy. If you have questions about your billing statement, then I would encourage you to contact our bursar.
Great. We were also having a question about just an update on new building construction. Is it still on track?
I was actually just about to type into the chat box.
All right.
That, to my knowledge, because I had a conversation yesterday, it is still on track and slated to be opening this spring. So yes and yes.
Great.
And the cool thing about that building is it's going to allow us to consolidate a lot of different resources and offices and support structures in sort of one spot. So it'll be a one-stop shop in many ways for academic advising, accessibility services, our career services office, just to name a few. So it's going to really help streamline the ways we support and assist students.
That's great, thank you. And would it be okay if I field one of my own questions?
Of course.
So we've had a lot of questions in the chat about family weekend, just with the parents eager to learn more information about the schedule. And so we are going to be putting a detailed schedule in the coming weeks on the website once the plans are finalized. People probably know we just confirmed the dates recently. So if people do have individual questions about their plans, they need to make flights, anything like that, please feel free to reach out to us at the Family Weekend website, alias it's fw@wpi.edu, and I'm happy to answer any questions that folks might have about that program specifically. And we will, on Move-In Days, families will be able to access the bookstore and other programs on that first day of new student orientation. We'll actually have some resource fairs and opportunities for parents to learn a little bit more about campus when they're moving their first year student in, specifically on Saturday, the 21st. I have one question that probably is a great way to end out our general questions, and that is, where can people go in general to learn about updates as the institution continues to make decisions about guidance and what the fall will look like? Is there a place where people should go to get their questions answered?
Great question. So we have the We Are WPI website, and that's where you're going to find the most current information. It's linked right off of our homepage, so that's the best way to get there. You can also, we would highly encourage you to reach out to the specific office that is related to your question. But if you're not sure who to reach, you can email wearewpi@wpi.edu. But as I said, most of those folks, they're going to farm it out to the correct office. So we always encourage, cut out the middle person and go directly to that office that is relevant to your question.
Great, thank you. And John, I have one question that is probably really relevant for a lot of our students, especially our first year students. when they're not really quite sure about what to bring to be successful academically, is there anything that you would recommend that they be prepared to bring for their classes?
Sure, yeah, I saw the question about online resources versus paper resources. In terms of handouts in class, more and more faculty are going to online resources, but for whatever helps you learn, for me, I still got my notebook right here that I use for keeping track of what I'm learning in meetings and everything I go to. But if you want to just take notes in a laptop, that's okay too. Although some faculty say, I don't want laptops open in my class because I don't know what you're doing. It varies widely by class, and I would certainly encourage people, ask faculty what they recommend for students to succeed in their class. We pride ourselves at WPI on supporting our students and being open to hearing from students what their questions are, how to support them. And we've got student success coaches as well that you can reach out to through the academic advising office, and just ask, do whatever makes you comfortable, but ask other people what works for them to succeed as well.
Great, perfect. Thank you so much. Noting the time and also seeing that we've pretty much answered all of our questions in the chat. So thank you to our backside panelists for being so diligent in answering all those great questions. Emily and John, can I just ask you what you're looking forward to the most as we enter the fall semester, and then we can let everyone go for the day.
Yeah, just seeing people back on campus, the vibrant community that we have at WPI, just having everyone in the family and the community back together.
I would second that. I'm super excited for WPI's great, awesome traditions. I love the bridge crossing for first year students. I love seeing so many people out and about studying, gathering, playing spike ball, throwing the Frisbee. I'm just really, we miss you in the summer, and we're really looking forward to you being here.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you.